Hello YouTube, welcome to my next deck profile video where I am going to be looking at a deck called the Monks of Doma. So as you can probably tell for those that have played the game anyway, this is a monk deck with a little bit of the Final Fantasy IV engine in it, hence the Doma. So, I mean, there's nothing really surprising about that anyway, because Yang, Ursula have always been a big part of the Monks deck, but it is mono Earth, so there is no any wind, water, Earth shenanigans going in this. It is pure Earth. Anyway, let's get to it. Right, so as you can see here, it doesn't have too many forwards, and ironically, it doesn't have too many forward monks either. There's a lot of the same, but there are quite a few non-monk forwards in this deck as well. But you've got the likes of Yang and Mart and Ursula, of which there are all three of, but then you've also got cards like Graf and Rydia and Cecil. So this is where the kind of Final Fantasy IV engine comes in. So you've got things like Scarmelian, Rydia and Cecil that also play into the 4 engine, and obviously those cards are there realistically to give Rydia a good buff for her counters. That graph right there, that says 3 graphs. There aren't meant to be 3 graphs. That's a typo, so my mistake, sorry. Anyway, let's get to the cards, shall we? So we're going to start off with Scarmelian. So here's a back attack with first strike, and when Scarmelian enters the field, choose one forward. During this turn, it is dealt damage, double the damage instead. So this card is great for 2 interactions specifically. So let's say your opponent is doing something and you want to cast a summon with Rydia, but you can't because you don't have enough counters. You can play Scarmelian at any point, so even on your opponent's turn, at which point Rydia will then gain 2 more counters, as Scarmelian is a Final Fantasy IV character, and that then means that you may be able to use Rydia to cast something like a big Titan or Mist Dragon to then cancel one of your opponent's summons. It's just a nice way to be able to scare or surprise your opponent even, because they may look at Rydia and say, oh, she only has 4 counters at the moment, she can't cast Titan, but then you play Scarmelian and then you can cast the Titan. Also works excellently with Ursula, because you can play Scarmelian onto the field, which then means the next damage dealt can be doubled. So Ursula, rather than having to break a monk to increase her power and then remove another monk to then deal damage, Scarmelian can just make it so that even though she's only dealing 5k, she will actually double that to 10k as well. Now, we've got Rydia, as I mentioned before. There are 4 different summons in this deck, and they are Mist Dragon, Titan, and the other one which I can't see. Alexander. There we go. And these are all pretty good summons in this deck. Obviously, the big 5 CP summon is the best one, but that's probably just due to the fact that he's EX. But being able to cast any of these guys isn't too hard, because you only need at most 2 additional Final Fantasy IV characters to enter the field to be able to give Rydia her ability to be able to cast these. Rydia coming in, she gives herself 2 counters anyway, so that means off of the bat she can cast Alexander, but then one more character, you've got Mist Dragon and then Titan as well, and then another character on top of that, you've got the other Titan. But yeah, being able to cast summons for free is really powerful. She's kind of hard to get rid of as well. If your opponent doesn't have an outright break or a board wipe, Rydia is likely going to stick around. And being able to just pay for free, buff all of your monks, or just not all your monks, sorry, but buffing your monks or cancelling a summon or removing your opponent's break zone with the likes of Mist Dragon is really powerful, and just means that your monks actually have a bit more staying power as well. Right, Graph. A similar sort of thing. At the beginning of your attack phase, during each of your turns, all the Earth forwards or category Mobius forwards you control gain plus 2,000 power until the end of the turn. Just a nice, it's not essential to play this card, but ultimately, if you have monks on the field, you've got a wide board, but your opponent has a lot of big forwards as well, having Graph will mean that all of your forwards gain plus 2,000 power until the end of the turn, which is not an insignificant amount, and that can be comboed with something like Ursula as well, so actually she'll end up, you know, if she puts a monk into the break zone, she will deal 7k to something rather than the base 5, because it's based on her power, the damage that is dealt. So it's just a nice way to be able to buff that, as well as, again, giving your forwards a bit more protection. And then in Stitching Time S as well, if you do happen to get it, isn't too bad. You get to draw yourself a card, and all your forwards gain plus 5,000 power, which is pretty good. If you get to do that on your opponent's turn when they're attacking, and you've got some massive forwards, that can go really bad for them. Right, now we've got Cecil. So when Cecil enters the field, you may receive 1 point of damage. When you do so, choose one forward your opponent controls. Cecil and the chosen forward deal damage equal to their respective power to the other, and damage 3, Cecil gains 1000 power and brave. So really, Cecil's in here not only to give Rydia some counters, but also a way to be able to force damage, because when your opponent sees something or sees that you're a monks, they will know that you're playing Yang, and at damage 1, you already get a pretty good ability of Yang, but then damage 3 you get even more abilities, and your opponent does not want those abilities to happen unless they can rush you down and kill you. So having Cecil to force that damage onto yourself, to then make it so that Yang is at least getting, even if it's your first point of damage, you will still be getting that first ability off with Yang. So that's really, really useful. And again, he can also potentially kill something as well if you're playing him and then they deal damage to something else that's either small or the same power. Cecil will kill it, and then again, damage 3, Cecil becomes bigger, which alongside Yang means actually he becomes a lot like the monks. He'll have plus 1000 and brave. Yang, so here we go. So damage 1, when Yang enters the field, you may play one job monk or card name monk from your hand onto the field. And then damage 3, Yang gains the job monk forwards, card name monk forwards you control gain plus 1000 and brave. So a similar ability to Cecil. But yeah, that damage 1 is just so incredibly powerful because he can play literally any monk onto the field. So the 6 CP Mart, any backups, Ursula, it's just a really, really solid play. But I mean, yeah, playing Yang into Ursula then plays you a 2 CP monk backup onto your field. Just for 3 CP you get 2 forwards and a backup is really, really good. And then again, the damage 3, this card just gets better and better as time goes on throughout both the game and as more cards are released, because the more monks that come out, the better this card gets. And again, if you don't have the Ursula, play Yang to play Mart, to then get yourself the Ursula to hand, which you could either play or do something else with. I also really like this because the 5 CP standard unit monk, his cost is reduced for every monk you control. But Yang goes into another monk, which immediately reduces the cost. So let's say you don't want to search yourself an Ursula, maybe you've got them all in hand in the break zone, something like that. You can play Yang into Mart, and Mart can actually search you the 5 CP monk, which now at the very most will cost you 3 CP because you've got those 2 monks already on the field. And 3 CP for an AK forward isn't too bad. Right, Monk. So, dull 1 active card name Monk. Monk gains 1000 power until the end of the turn. A pretty standard card, to be honest, nothing to write home about, but gaining Brave from Yang is really good because that means you can attack with him and then use his dull ability, and he can dull himself to buff himself once more. And what's even better is the fact that you can dull your backups as well. It's just dull 1 active card name Monk. It doesn't matter if it's forward, backup, monster, whatever. You can dull it and give this monk plus 1000. So you can block with this guy, dull himself, he becomes an 8k. With Yang on the field, with his damage 3 ability, he's actually a 9k. So, you know, it's really easy to be able to buff this card. And, you know, something that monks does really well is play more monks. So having loads of monks on the field with this dude is actually kind of scary for your opponent. C card. So, yeah, I mean, one of the problems with monks is the fact that they're pretty easy to kill. So you do have things like Mist Dragon and Titans there to be able to hopefully save them, but ultimately you are probably going to be blocking a lot with your monks as well, and having something like C card so that the damage is reduced to them and also protects against the likes of fire and lightning means that just having C card there to be able to add that bit of protection to all your earth forwards, because again you are in mono earth, it's just excellent way to do it, I think. And C card is a really good card if you're just looking for something maybe just to fill out some space in your own mono earth. C card's fantastic, and I have won more than a few games using this card because it presents your opponent with a big problem. Ursula. So, yeah, kind of the jewel in the crown here. When Ursula enters the field, choose one job monk or card name monk cost 2 or less in your break zone and play it onto the field. So it can also be a forward as well, but yeah, there aren't any cost 2 monks in this deck that are forwards, unfortunately. And then you can put one job or card name monk other than Ursula into the break zone and select one to do following actions until the end of the turn. Ursula gains plus 4000 and Brave, or choose one forward, it deals damage to Ursula's power. So yeah, being able to just put any monk into the break zone is a really powerful ability. And the 5 CP monk that I mentioned before, which I'll probably get onto next actually, more than once I've played that onto the field for 1 CP, then immediately put it into the break zone to give Ursula plus 4 and Brave, or just to, you know, deal a lot of damage to something. Again, it's not like Ursula feels like she's sacking off a lot of your cards and actually is not getting you much value, but realistically it's actually a fantastic way to be able to kill stuff. Now, as I mentioned before, obviously it's based on Ursula's power, so you want her power to be big, but using things like Titan, which can plus 10,000 power Ursula. And then even if you sack off a couple of monk backups, you're still dealing 10k to do different forwards, which really isn't bad. And that Titan you can play for free, using something like Rydia. It's just, you have to find ways around Ursula being kind of inefficient by breaking your stuff. So using things like Rydia to cast things for free, and using stuff like Yang to play things onto the field free is just really powerful. And then we've got the little monk. Yeah, it's not hard to make this dude quite low in cost, and as I've said before, just playing Mart onto the field to get this dude, I've done quite a few times. Play him onto the field for 1 CP because his cost is also reduced by the backup monks as well. So yeah, play him onto the field, sack him off for Ursula, just leave him there because he's a 9k with Yang with Brave. You know, it's just super powerful. And then Mart, another essential card in this deck. So the job monk forwards and cardinal monk forwards you control cannot become dull by your opponent's summons or abilities. That is super useful. Even if all your forwards don't have Brave yet through something like Yang, still having it so that they can't become dulled. Maybe you can't push through, but you still aren't getting dulled out from ice or something like that, or lightning even. Really good. You might have this massive field, but if your opponent can dull your forwards, doesn't mean much. So having Mart here, making sure that they can't be dulled, is really good. And then obviously when you enter the field, you can search one job monk or cardinal monk and add it to your hand. Maybe you're just looking for that one backup you want. Maybe you're just looking for the forward you want. Either way, Mart is super consistent and super useful in the deck. Right, now we'll move on to the actual stars of the show, in my opinion, and these are the monk backups. All these monk backups are really powerful and really good. So pay 2 Earth Dull, put monk into the break zone, choose one dull forward you control, it cannot be broken this turn. Being able to save any of your forwards, so being able to save Rydia, maybe your opponent invests a lot into getting rid of her, they use something like Kuchaspel, then they maybe do something to her to try and kill her. So long as she's dull, use monk, she now no longer can be broken, and that is just really useful. Being able to just have this in hand, or not in hand, sorry, on the field, ready to save something, super useful. Now one problem with this is the fact that it damage 3 and you've got Yang on the field. A lot of your monks are going to have Brave, so they're not going to become dull, which means monk can't save them, but still, it means you can save the likes of Rydia, Graf, and C-Card, which is the main reason I put her here, because she ultimately can save those forwards that aren't monks, and she can obviously still be put into the break zone to use Ursula's ability as well. And then this monk is just really good. So dull, put monk into the break zone, choose one forward until the end of the turn against plus 3000 power and Brave. You can only use this ability during your main phase, but being able to give something like Rydia plus 3000 and Brave, so they can actually become a bit more of a threat when they attack, is quite useful. Again, combine that with something like Graf, and actually you've got some really big forwards on your field. And again, Brave is always good. Monk, now this monk is just... This monk is really powerful. So dull, put monk into the break zone, choose one forward, deal it 3000 damage for each job monk or cardinal monk you control. Yeah, playable off of Ursula as well, as were the past 2 monks. But yeah, playing Earth and breaking this monk, you're going to be dealing at least 9k to pretty much anything on the field. But yeah, being able to deal at least 9k for just a $1 break. There are so many monks on the field, both backups and forwards, it means that you are just going to be nuking so many things with this card. And yeah, just really good. Also, I love the artwork. Right, this monk is also super essential because it's super consistent. When monk enters the field, choose one job monk or cardinal monk in your break zone, add it to your hand. You don't really want this card too early game because it's how you're going to be getting stuff like Ursula back to your hand. Because in this deck, I don't really run Kusith, and you could do, it would make sense if you did, but I focused more on offensive and reactive summons. So yeah, having this monk there to be able to get Ursula out of the break zone, or not even Ursula, maybe Yang to play stuff for free, I found really useful. And then obviously you've got the pay Earth Dull, put monk into the break zone, choose one job monk forward and cardinal monk forward you control, and one forward your opponent controls. Each forward deals damage equal to its power to the other. You can only use this ability during your turn, so it acts like a Hecaton Shear summon. But dealing damage between forwards isn't the worst when you have something like C-Card on the field, because the damage they would receive is reduced anyway, and again, it's not hard to buff all your forwards. You can just go to your attack phase, use Graf to buff all your forwards, you then use the monk to deal damage between, say, Yang and another forward. Yang at damage 3, plus 1000, with Graf plus 2000 more. C-Card in the field takes 1000 less, so you've got a 4k damage swing already on your side, which is just excellent. Right, non-monk cards. So Lail, again, just really good to be able to cancel summons. One of the biggest threats to this deck is something like the Wind Alexander that can break something like Mart, And it might seem silly to focus solely on Mart, but ultimately he is a super useful protection card. Now he does obviously, when he re-enters, searches you more cards, but having things like Lail to cancel summons like that really do threaten your board, where they can just outright break some of your forwards, like the old school Odins. Now obviously Lail doesn't protect against some of the bigger summons, but that's why you've got something like Mist Dragon to cancel the 5 CP summons as well. But yeah, having Lail, just a singular Lail there, just threatening your opponent so they have to cast at least 2 summons to be able to kill some of your stuff is useful. Cecil, so I only run one of this guy, but mostly it's just to give some of your other forwards Brave. So he can choose one forward and one other forward until the end of the turn. The former loses Haste, First Strike, and Brave, and the latter gains all the abilities lost by the previous effect until the end of the turn. So it means that you can, say you've got Yang on the field, he's giving all your monks Brave, you can attack with Yang, and then use Cecil so that Yang loses Brave, and then give it to something like Seaguard or Rydia, so that then they have Brave as well, so that they're also there as a blocker on the following turn. And Scholar. So when Scholar enters the field, choose up to 1 card in your break zone, place it at the bottom of your deck, and put the top card of your deck in the break zone, and then you can break him to shuffle your deck. This is a strange card because you're kind of half milling yourself and you don't know what you're going to be putting into the break zone, but the main reason I like this card is because you are able to put cards back from your break zone into the deck to then be searched by Mart. So let's say you've unfortunately lost a lot of your Ursulas very early on. It means that you can use Scholar to put Ursula back into the deck, play Yang to then play Mart to go search yourself that other Ursula and get her back to hand. And I think that is a really, really essential ability. Now obviously you need to be careful because, you know, you're probably going to end up milling yourself a good card into the break zone as well, but hopefully it'll be something like a forward that you don't care too much about, or a backup if you don't need any more backups. So you need to be careful of that. Also good to put something like Titan back into the deck as well to give yourself another potential EX burst if you are able to shuffle your deck as well, because obviously bear in mind, you know, you are going to have that card at the bottom of your deck, so you need to shuffle again. Thankfully the Scholar does allow you to do that though. And then finally move on to the summons. Now this Alexander I think is a bit of an unsung hero. I quite like it. So choose 1 forward you control and up to 1 forward opponent controls. Until the end of the turn, the former gains plus 3,000 power, and this forward cannot become dull by your opponent's summons or abilities. So that's really, really good in and of itself. But then if you have received 5 points of damage or more, also deal the latter damage equal to the highest power forward you control. And that second part I think is really cool and interesting. So you can use Alexander to buff, say, Rydia. And then let's say your opponent has a response to just break your Rydia. Fair enough, Rydia is now dead. However, Alexander still has a target, and that is your opponent's forward. Now, as long as you are at damage 5, Alexander will look for the highest power forward you have, and then deal damage from that forward to the forward your opponent controls. So even if Rydia dies, if you still have something like Yang or Seacard or whatever on the field, Alexander will go to that forward and then use that as a damage source. So even if your opponent destroys the forward that Alexander's targeting, provided you're at 5 damage, Alexander will still look for a forward on your field, see which one's the highest power, and then deal your opponent's forward damage equal to their power. And I think that's really cool. Also, a nice EX. Mist Dragon, yeah, as I mentioned before, just a very reactive play. Choose one summon that costs 5 or less, cancels effect, so get rid of those Diablos and those Odins, which are just going to be disgusting and breaking all of your stuff. And it also stops reactivations as well. Choose 1 forward you control, dull it. During this turn, the damage dealt to it becomes 0 instead. Again, another nice way to be able to protect some of your forwards. And then remove all the cards in your opponent's break zone from the game and draw a card. 1, nice for consistency because you get another card to hand, but also 2, just really useful for so many decks that just pull stuff out of that break zone. And again, playing Mist Dragon for free using something like Rydia is just really, really good. Titan. So choose 1 forward, it gains plus 1,000 power until the end of the turn. That's perfectly fine. You know, you make it so that Ursula becomes 15,000 power, and then you just put a monk into the break zone, you deal 15k to something. That's going to kill pretty much anything in this game. And then choose 1 forward, deal it 7k damage. Another nice way just to be able to actually deal damage to something. Not that this deck is lacking in that way anyway. Obviously, you can reduce Titan's cost by using Crystal, but I don't run any Crystal generating cards in this deck. You could run the Earth Geomancer in place of something like the Scholar potentially to do this, but ultimately I think its cost is perfectly fine anyway, and hopefully you're paying it for free with Rydia anyway. And then finally Titan, run 3 of this dude because why wouldn't you? This card is just incredible. Ever since its first printing in Opus 6, it has been a mainstay in Earth, and yeah, choose one forward you control the forward opponent, and one forward opponent controls the former gains 2000 power, and then the former deals damage equal to the power to the latter. So yeah, just really, really good. A fantastic EX burst, and unless you only have Scarmelian on the field, hopefully you'll be killing something. Again, with Yang on the field, buffing all your forwards. Similar, you could use Graph during your attack phase, then cast this card with Rydia for free. Just, yeah, super, super good. And now it's time for some honourable mentions. I already mentioned a couple already, but I'll go over a few others. So, Robel Akbel. So, you're going to be using something like Ursula to probably break a lot of your backups, or just using the backup's own backup breaking abilities to be able to deal lots of damage to your opponent's forwards. So having Robel Akbel be able to cycle them back into your hand is super efficient and really good. Now, as I mentioned before, you don't have any crystal generators, so Robel Akbel won't have its entry ability, but again, you could replace the Scholar in this deck with something like the Geomancer, so that you are getting crystals off of Robel Akbel as well if you wanted. Lael. So, when Lael or a forward enters the field, place one bearer counter on Lael, and then remove 3 bearer counters from Lael. Choose one forward removed from the game. You can only use ability while Lael is attacking. Yeah, I think this is really good because Lael gets 1 from himself entering anyway, so you only need 2 more for him to attack. Yang into literally any other monk forward gets you those 2 crystals. Pretty sharpish. Works similarly to Rydia as well. So, you know, just those forwards coming in, or just Mart going to search something, then playing that onto the field, giving Lael those 2 additional counters. It's really easy in this deck to be able to give Lael those additional counters so that when Lael attacks, he's removing something. And removing something is super good. Joker, so Dull and Unearth. Choose one forward with Brave. During this turn, the next damage dealt to it is reduced by 2000 instead. So you've already got Seaguard, which can do a similar sort of thing, but most of your forwards are going to have Brave when you're at damage 3 or more because of Yang. And then there's other ways to be able to give Brave through using the likes of the Monk backup that I mentioned earlier. So yeah, being able to then use Joker to make sure that they take less damage as well. Just good. And you know, you can also use Joker on your opponent's turn as well. They're attacking with something, Yang has Brave, you make it so that he takes 2000 power less and he can safely block a 8k or 9k as well, actually. And Garland. So let's say hypothetically you wanted to go into Earth Fire, and you could. Now it won't be as consistent, but there are the likes of Vargas and Sabin, and now you've got the Yosef backup, who is a job monk and would search you something like the Earth Firium potentially. But yeah, being able to have Garland on the field and Ursula, and using Ursula to just keep on sacking off your backups and also getting a card with Garland, I think sounds like fun. I haven't actually done this yet, and I really want to. I fully intend to make a Fire Earth Monks deck, but yeah, using Garland, and as I mentioned before, a lot of the monks have really good backup breaking abilities, so again, using that to nuke some of your opponent's forwards whilst also gaining cards with Garland, I think just sounds like a barrel of laughs. And there we have it. That is my Mono Earth Monk deck. I've played it a fair few times. It did reasonably well. It can just ramp really quickly. Some of the limitations on the deck is the fact that if your opponent does run a lot of board wipes, which, you know, are becoming a lot more common these days, it will start to suffer, but it's still really consistent. If you get things like Yang into Ursula, into another backup, and then just using backups to kill things, and you can kill things pretty quickly, then you're going to be doing alright. You can build up large forwards, but the one problem with this deck is the fact that you want to keep on playing forwards, and, you know, that is where you might stumble a little bit. Just make sure to limit yourself. Play only maybe like 3 or max 4 forwards at a time, unless you really are going for game. But yeah, it's a really, really fun deck to run, and it kind of plays itself in some regards because, you know, using Matt to search Yang, to play Ursula, to get another monk onto the field, just really good. And all this while just giving more counters to Rydia to be able to cast summons for free. I think it's a lot of fun, and I recommend playing it. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. Stay safe, be lucky, and I'll see you in the next video.